Obamacare?
Well, I think there's going to be big news from the White House in the next week or two of something they can do on their own. And this is something I've been advocating for 6 months. I think it's bigger than Graham Cassidy. It's bigger than any reform we've even talked about to date, but hasn't gotten enough attention. I believe that President Trump can legalize on his own the ability of individuals to join a group or a health association across state lines and buy insurance. This would give enormous leverage to bringing down prices. It would also give protection to individuals that feel left out, hung out to dry, basically, if you and your spouse buy insurance by yourself, that if your spouse gets sick, you will be punished by the insurance industry. If these individuals can join large groups across state lines, I think they'll get protection, less expensive insurance, and really it'll solve a lot of the problems we have in the individual market. I think President Trump's going to do this on his own.
So this will be news to a lot of people. Are you suggesting an executive order of some kind, Senator?
There was a law passed in the 1970s called the ERISA law. It already allows corporations, if my corporation is in 20 different states, I already can buy insurance across state lines. It's called large group ERISA and self-insured type of insurance. But it's the insurance people like the most, and it's had the least rise in premiums. It's about 36% of the market. It already exists. What I'm trying to do is let individuals get into that marketplace, and this would be an enormous benefit. And it's not necessarily an executive order. I think it'll be a reinterpretation of existing law with a more expansive definition of who can form an association.
Is this an idea, Senator, that you presented to the president?
On multiple occasions, I've spoken with Secretary of Labor on it. They're enthusiastic about it, but I think Graham Cassidy, frankly, distracted us. The good thing about my proposal, it costs $0. I don't think people on the left are going to hate it. It basically is legalizing the ability of consumers to collectively come together to bargain for cheaper prices. We need to do this because the insurance companies have all the power. If you watched any of the debate recently over this, both left and right think insurance companies have too much power. How do we give power to the consumer? Let the consumer organize.
Do you have concerns, though, Senator, something that's been raised by some of your colleagues, particularly John McCain, about the abandonment of regular order, and that is to go through the process of hearings and a vote to get such a major piece of legislation through, and now just doing it by executive order and reshaping a piece of the economy?
Right. Well, I don't think this is going to add something. It's going to legalize the choice of consumers to get together. So I'm not too worried about the president looking at this law. With regard to regular order and should we talk about things together, yeah, I think there is room for that. And I think that part of the reason the country's been at such odds with each other is Democrats passed Obamacare with only Democrat votes. If Republicans undo it, we'll have the same sort of situation. And I also think that what I really objected to about this whole idea of Graham Cassidy was it had nothing to do with repealing Obamacare. All it was doing was reshuffling the money from Democrat states to Republican states. And as soon as the Democrats get back in power, what was going to happen? They'd reshuffle and claw the money back to Democrat states. It was not a fix. I think it was furthering the enmity between the two parties.
Senator Nick Confessore, so walk us through 2018, a second chance in Obamacare repeal. How should it look? How many votes are needed? Can they write the same rules on reconciliation to not require the 60-plus votes? Kind of walk us through the next step of repeal.
Well, I think the next thing is going to be tax reform, hopefully a tax cut to help us thrive as an economy. And I think after that, yes, we can readdress health care at any point in time. I think there will continue to be bipartisan hearings as well on this. And I think there's some ideas, like my idea of health associations, that we could actually pass laws to expand the definition as well. And I think there could be bipartisan support for that because mine doesn't necessarily displace the current system. Mine allows people an exit ramp to get out of the individual market, to get into group market and get cheaper insurance.
Senator, the president, I'm just looking down here, tweeted a few minutes ago, we will have the votes for health care, but not for the reconciliation deadline of Friday, after which we need 60, get rid of filibuster rule. You've just pointed to something that he's going to do independent of Congress, but he's still talking about having the votes to get something like Graham Cassidy through. Aren't those two things at odds with each other?
Well, I think the filibuster's neither here nor there because we only had to have 50 votes this time and didn't get to 50. I continued to offer, even this week, to the president and his team. They sent over a team from the White House. We told them we would accept a narrower version of Graham Cassidy that included expansion of health savings accounts, more waivers to the governors, and repeal of the mandates that make you pay a tax if you don't buy insurance, and as well as some entitlement reform. And so we just didn't like the block grants. But we did like, a good percentage of the bill, but nobody really could get their you-know-what together to actually figure out how you get people to come together together to get the votes, and it needs more of that. I had very little discussion with the other senators promoting this bill because they just sort of decided not to negotiate. And if they want to get all the votes, they're going to have to come and talk about how we can make the bill more acceptable to everybody on the Republican side.
Senator Paul, this is Josh Earnest here. I wanted to ask you a question about the big political story of the day. On the Democratic side, there's been a lot of talk about how Nancy Pelosi was a bit of a drag on Democratic candidates in some of the special elections we saw earlier this year. It's clear in this recent election that your fellow Kentuckian, Leader McConnell, was a drag on Senator Strange in his re-election campaign, or his special election there. So I was wondering from you about the mood of your colleagues in the Republican conference. Is there dissatisfaction with Senator McConnell? Is there concern that he could be a millstone around the neck of your colleagues like Rick Keller and Jeff Flake, who themselves are facing pretty tough contests in primaries this year?
I think some of the results in Alabama are that people don't like to be told what to do by anybody, whether it's the establishment Republicans or conservative Republicans. I think, frankly, primary voters in Alabama don't want to be told what to do, and they're independent. They resist outsiders telling them what to do, and I think that's true in a lot of different states. So I think that's probably the take-home message there. As far as whether any one person's to blame, I think people are unhappy that we didn't keep our promise, which was repeal, but I don't necessarily blame that on Senator McConnell. He voted for all the permutations of repeal, but I do think that the people who voted for repeal in 2015 do need to go back to their states and explain to people why they couldn't vote for an identical bill in 2017 that they voted for in 2015.
Different topic, Senator, and that is North Korea. Yesterday, President Trump talked again about what he called the second option, one he said he doesn't want to have to use, but will be ready to use, and that's military force against North Korea. But still exploring diplomatic channels like the pressure he put on Chinese banks just last week through the State Department. What other ideas have we not exhausted? What would you do?
Well, I think we haven't found what works because we still have a standoff and a real problem, and I think the rhetoric needs to be ratcheted down. I'm a big fan of Graham Allison's new book, Destined for War, The Thucydides Trap, and I think you all have had him on. Yep. But in this, he talks about rising powers and the danger of war with a rising power, and some of it is respect. And so I think we want China to help us with North Korea. I think they have the ability to, but the mood in Washington has been, let's slap more sanctions on China and let's tell them they've got to do what we want to do. Well, a rising power wants to be treated more with, equality and more with respect. And I think one way to treat China with respect is say, yes, we need your help. And guess what? We'd like you to be part of the solution in Korea. And if you could convince North Korea to completely dismantle their program, what if we have China as part of a peacekeeping force in Korea? I don't think anybody's proposed this. Have them be part of a peacekeeping force in exchange for North Korea giving up their weapons. North Korea does have to be reassured, and we have to realize that they got a terrible lesson from us attacking Libya. When President Obama attacked Libya, he sent a message to the world that if you give up your nuclear weapons, guess what? We still may topple you. North Korea took that to heart, and that's a real problem. We have to overcome North Korea's distrust of our motives. So you're talking about putting Chinese troops essentially along the DMZ with American troops, and you believe that would put enough pressure on China. Give China something that would then allow them to put pressure on North Korea, that North Korea would completely give up its nuclear program? It may or may not work. It's an idea. We need more ideas and we need more discussion of it. But I'm not talking about initially doing this. I'm talking about doing this in exchange for North Korea dismantling the program. There would be simultaneous sort of things, and it would be China as part of an international force. But I think the North Koreans might be reassured that we're not going to invade North Korea if there's Chinese forces there. Now, will it work? No, but it's a way to go to China. It may be a way to work, but it's a way to go to China with respect and ask them for their help, as opposed to telling China, if you don't do what we say, we're going to put more sanctions on you and your banks. I think China will react adversely to being bullied. I think they're a great superpower. They're a rising superpower, and we need to treat them as such. If we want to get things from them, we need to treat them with respect. All right, we'll see what the president thinks about that idea, and we'll look for news out of the White House, as you mentioned, with health care. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, thanks as always.
We will make America great again.